Why, hello everyone. Welcome back to the series, the best series. How's everyone doing? Today we're going to be jumping into Act 5, aka the introduction of the trolls. But first, we're going to summarize the events thus far. So, John Egbert, on his birthday, got a game called Spurb, started playing it with his friends, and then it brought about the end of Earth, and then they got transported to like a weird world place thing. Yeah, and they're trying to beat the game, but then they found out the game's apparently unbeatable. And they're trying to get help, maybe, sort of, from the trolls. That's not going so well. John died, and Dave had to fix it by going back in time and prototyping himself. And Carcat yelled a lot. And Jade was cagey. And Rose spoken long-winded prose. Yeah, that basically sums it up. Let's get going, shall we? So, elsewhere in Paradox space, we examine another planet forgotten by time. The reader attempts to enter a funny haha name, but the narrative doesn't like that, so it makes us pick another one. This planet's name is Alternia, and thus we begin Hive Bent. We see a young troll standing in his respite block. Today, for this young troll, the 12th bilunar perigee of the 6th dark season's equinox, is the day of his larval awakening, also known as his wriggling day. Though it was 6 solar sweeps ago he was given life, it is only today he will be given a name. And just so you know, 6 sweeps is equivalent to 13 years, so he's, the same age as the kids. What is the name of this troll? The reader once again puts in a silly name. But no, Carcat can't have none of that shit. Anyway, his name's Carcat Vantis. Today is his wriggling day. And we see him standing in his room, and we learn that his interests include ridiculously terrible romantic movies and rom-coms. Feel you there, buddy. Love me some shitty rom-coms. He likes programming, but is notoriously awful at it. And he likes to pretend that he's just really good at making computer viruses, but in reality, he just sucks at programming. One day he wants to be a Threshicutioner. What is that? Some alien thing, don't worry about it. His weapon of choice is a sickle. John's weapon of choice is a hammer. Yeah, just think about that one for a while. Anyway, in his free time, he likes to chat with his other troll friends, and his troll tag is carcinogeneticist, and he types in all caps because he's always angry, or at least likes to come off that way. Later, he'll play a game with 5 other friends and go on a big adventure. But as of now, the game does not exist. So what will Carcat do? Carcat goes over to his Recoup Raccoon, filled with soap or slime. This is essentially where trolls sleep. He jumps in and then gets mad because he forgot to take his clothes off first. So he jumps out and puts on fresh clothes. And then he starts examining his movie posters. And the narrative points out that that is definitely John Cusack over there, and that though most people don't realize it, John Cusack is a universal constant. Is that going to be plot relevant? Who even knows with this webcomic? And then we see this with this Troll Sandler movie. Yes, the trolls have troll versions of Earth celebrities, but what if the Earth celebrities are just human versions of the troll celebrities? Carcat captchalogs his sickle in his encryption modus, which at this point, the Solidexes were so overdone and stuff that Hussey decided that all of the trolls' Solidexes would be really stupid and overcomplicated to make fun of the idea of Solidexes in the first place. So Carcat's Solidex seals the item inside, and then he has to use his amazing, except not actually amazing, programming skills to get it out, which means that getting anything out of there is a fucking nightmare for Carcat. And he goes to grab the card vault, and he accidentally captchalogs the card vault in another card vault, which causes the extremely heavy card vault to fall to the floor. He then goes over and picks up the big black book, which is a Till Death handbook, Till Death being a type of programming code that activates certain commands and stuff upon the death of whatever you decide. So you could, for instance, say, blow up my computer when I die, for instance. It's really dumb and complicated, and it's supposed to be, so I'm not going to explain it too much, but I do like the Till Death name. I think that's pretty funny, because it's just a tilde and then ATH. Anyway, Carcat heads out onto one of his mini balconies, and we see his house, and it is a weird looking house, but he is an alien, to be fair. We also see the green moon in the background, and if you didn't notice earlier, there are 2 moons, a green one and a pink one. Well, we will worry about those more later. We see a couple of the other houses, and by the way, they're not called houses, they're called hives, just for future reference. That's what I will be calling them. And apparently, when trolls are young, they get to build their own houses, which is a very weird way of doing things, but I guess that explains why his house looks so weird. We get a look at the neighborhood and the 2 moons in the sky. Carcat's like, I don't got time for this shit. I'm an impatient boy. And he goes back inside. And he picks up his Game Grub magazine. And then his DVD copy of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Ha ha ha. Good shit. It's a since you obviously wouldn't know anything about this series, it being a troll TV series and all, it is a series about a Threshercutioner cadet who goes around sassing up the Blue Bloods. And by Blue Bloods, I do mean their blood is literally blue. Fucking snobs. Alright. Karkat gets on his computer and starts talking to his buddy, terminally capricious, aka Gamzee. We'll get to meet him pretty soon. We also get to see Gamzee's typing quirk for the first time, where so basically what he does is one letter's lowercase, one letter's uppercase, and it just goes back and forth like that. Karkat gives him shit for that, and then Gamzee's like, look, I could just type normally, but it just feels unnatural, man. Yeah. We learn that Gamzee's real big on miracles, and also Fago, which is a thing that trolls apparently have. So basically this whole conversation is just Gamzee being stoned as fuck, going on about miracles and shit, and how the world's just so fucking mysterious, man. And Karkat just getting increasingly annoyed. Karkat gets fed up with the shit and says, you know what will be the miracle to end all miracles if I ever meet a kid I despise more than you? That will make me a motherfucking convert. And then we go to Gamzee. Who we see is a fucking juggalo troll, Gamzee Makara. His interests include clowns of a grim persuasion which may not be in full possession of their mental faculties. He belongs to a rather obscure cult, which foretells of a band of rowdy and capricious minstrels, which will one day rise on a mythical paradise planet that does not exist yet. The cult is apparently somewhat frowned upon, but he doesn't care. Just gotta do what's motherfucking right, you know? He likes to practice on his one-wheel device, aka a unicycle, which he's apparently awful at because his feet do not reach the pedals. He likes to kick back, enjoy a fine beverage, and a little baking. And he's got all these clown horns lying around, or bike horns or whatever. And apparently he steps on them a lot and scares the shit out of himself. His troll tag is terminally capricious, and he speaks in a manner that is just a little bit whimsical. Gamzee then captulogs the bottle of Fago, and we see his Silodex. He has the miracle modus. How does it work? Who the fuck knows? But Gamzee doesn't want to know, because you don't understand miracles, man. They just happen, man. Gamzee just sort of stares at the fucking colors of the miracle modus. And then he attempts to ride his one-wheel device, and that goes horribly, and he lands in a pile of horns. And he goes over and samples his delicious So Poor Slime Pie, which is the thing that makes him fucking high all the time, because it's actually really bad for you. Or, well, really bad for trolls. I don't know if it's bad for humans, honestly. And then we then see that his weapon of choice is a club. And then he heads outside, looking to see if his guardian is around. But they are not. He then gets a message from Terezi, but he's not sure how the hell to get his laptop out of his Miracle Modus. So he tries throwing some special stardust in his face after doing a short prayer to the mirthful messiahs. And then his Fago goes launching out of the Sylladex into the ocean. We'll get back to that Fago later. Then he just kind of sort of walks over to the Miracle Modus and just kind of reaches in and pulls out his laptop. And then he starts his conversation with Terezi, who is inviting him to play a game. And then she tries to like fuck with him as she fucks with everyone, but it just doesn't get to KMZ. He's just too fucking happy all the time, which just annoys her. But yeah, so eventually she just kind of gets back to talking about the game, and then he spaces out for a while. We'll go back to Carcat, who's doing some programming, and he's making a till death file. He tries to make a file that will execute upon his death, but he doesn't seem to be able to get it right, so yeah, he opens up another file, which he got from his friend Solix, who we have not met yet, that apparently will activate upon the death of two separate universes, labeled Universe 1 and Universe 2. He then has a conversation with Solix. Solix tells Carcat that he's setting up a game for their group to play. And Carcat goes on his usual angry tirades for no real reason and is apparently against playing the game. Although he's probably not actually against it, he just has to be fucking, an asshole all the time and pretend like he's too good for shit. But according to Solix, it's like the fate of their entire civilization to play this game. Carcat thinks it sounds stupid, but whatever. Apparently the game was made from some technology that one of the other trolls dug out of some ruins. That's right, kiddos. We're getting some lore about how the game is made, but shh, they're not even playing the game yet. But that's okay. Then Carcat and Solix start having a big back and forth about where they're basically just, having a pissing contest. And then it gets a little out of hand, and then they kind of have a moment where they're like, okay, let's chill out. Like, okay, so what's the game about? And Solix doesn't really tell us or Carcat what the game's about, although we know what the game is about because we've already read the first 4 acts. But apparently there's going to be 2 teams, which is very different from how the kids play it. There's going to be a red team and a blue team, 6 people on each team. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Instead of having 4 people playing the game, there are now 2 teams of 6. How will that change things? I guess we'll see. Anyway, they start fighting some more, and then they kind of make up at the end. And Solix goes off to do other things, and as does Carcat. And then Carcat hears his custodian grumbling downstairs, probably from the card slot thing that fell through the floor. And then we go over to this young lady Terezi Pyrope. What is she like? Well, she likes colorful things. Anything that's bright and colorful is her fucking shtick, man. And in case you don't remember, she is blind and instead uses her sense of smell and taste. Mostly smell, but they're kind of linked, so you know. She lives alone deep in the woods, apparently, which is a contrast to Carcat, who lived in a neighborhood. She surrounds herself with plushies called scale mates, which are like little plushy dragons. She likes LARPing, or live action role playing, if you don't know what that is. And she is a fan of extreme role playing. Or she was, at least, until one of her friends had an accident. I wonder what that was. She has an interest in justice, and a particular fascination for orchestrating the demise of the wicked. She's taken up the study of brutal Alternian law. But just in case you're wondering, she does not read Troll Braille because she can smell and taste the words on the pages. How does that work? Don't worry about it. She wants to be a legislacerator when she grows up, which is basically a lawyer. And her troll tag is Gallows Calibrator, and she speaks with the numerals of the blind prophets, which are 4, 1, and 3. So she pretty much speaks in leet speak. She replaces A's with 4, she replaces E's with 3's, and I's with 1. She's apparently the leader of the red team, but she's not playing the game yet. She's got time to kill. So she goes over to one corner and starts LARPing with her scale mates. It's one of her favorite scenarios, court block drama. On trial is the detestable fellow, Senator Lemon Snout. She sparred with him before, but tonight he faces justice. She will play the role of the prosecuting attorney. Apparently on Alternia, there is no such thing as a defense attorney, or a defense. In the court block, the word defense itself is offensive. She begins interrogating Lemon Snout. Apparently, most of the interrogation is intimidating silence, which seems to be a normal custom. Trezzy then slaps him around a bit. Not too hard, enough to sting, but not to bruise. It must be methodical, businesslike, and persistent. You only stop when you smell tears. She then grabs him by the snout and gives him a big whiff. She says that his yellow scales smell oh so sweet, like gumdrops, but his deceit stinks. Did he really think he could get away with this? Well, think again, good senator. The prosecution may be blind, but rest assured, the legislaturators see all. She then goes to call in a witness, but the witness has been murdered. How convenient. Terezi acknowledges Lemon Snout's cunning, and even hands him a teensy sliver of respect for now. But suddenly, a shocking development. On the floor, a personal satchel of Lemon Snouts, full of illicit embezzled beetles, falls to the ground. In reality, this of course was planted by Terezi, but it's all part of the game. It's time to sentence the criminal. Terezi pulls out a coin with Troll Seeger on either side, but one side is scratched. Whichever side it lands on will decide Lemon Snout's fate. Kind of like Two-Face from Batman, or the guy from No Country for Old Men. There's a lot of badasses that flip coins, but those are Earth things, and Terezi's never heard of them. And she likes to believe that she was the first one to come up with the idea. She tosses the coin in the air. Lemon Snout shakes in anticipation, sweating bullets. It lands face up, which seems to indicate that Lemon Snout will be going free. However, Terezi takes a step forward. What are you so happy about, Mr. Lemon Snout? He says that the coin has exonerated him. Coin? What coin? Surely you jest, Mr. Senator. The prosecution sees no coin. She's blind, remember? And then she takes Lemon Snout, throws a noose around his neck, and hangs him from her window. And we see that there are a few other scalemates hanging out of windows. Apparently she likes to do this a lot. And then court is adjourned. And then she starts licking the red chalk off the wall because red is her favorite color. Apparently it's the tastiest. She then grabs her cane, which is her weapon of choice. And we get a look into the future later, after she's started playing the game, of her using her cane. Just a glimpse into the future. Terezi then goes over to her computer to begin recruiting the red team members. Her first choice is Arsenic Catnip, or as we will come to know her, Nepeta, who is very big on role-playing, and in fact is always role-playing when she talks to someone in chat, unless they explicitly ask her to stop. But because Terezi likes role-playing, she initiates by having her dragon OC fly in and show up at the cave where Nepeta's OC lives. Nepeta's OC is a sort of large cat creature. And they sort of just devolve into a bit of role-playing. And after that, after the role-playing is done, Terezi asks Nepeta if she wants to be on the red team. And she says she would love to, but she has to get permission first. Terezi gets annoyed about this. Apparently one of the other friends in the group likes to boss Nepeta around, and Nepeta just sort of accepts it. And apparently she always has to run stuff by him. Nepeta says she'll go ask if she can be on the red team, and she'll get back to Terezi later. Terezi then goes and talks to Gamzee, and we already saw that conversation from Gamzee's perspective. Karkat then messages Terezi. Terezi hesitantly starts a conversation with Karkat. Karkat comes in saying that Terezi is no longer the leader of the red team, but Karkat is. Apparently, Solix decided that Karkat would be the leader now. And Terezi is sort of like, okay, am I supposed to be mad or whatever? And then Karkat's like, well, like, I mean, you can be, but it doesn't matter because I'm the leader now, as he is. And they get into their own little argument where Karkat calls Terezi a rocket-propelled spaz maggot spring-loaded up the ass of a psychedelic fucking freak-out weasel on idiot drugs. Whatever that means. Karkat says that he has picked Terezi to be his second-in-command, and she sarcastically swoons over the idea that he would be such a gentleman. To which he responds, "Fuck you, offer rescinded." Terezi asks if Karkat is up for being the leader, and Karkat says that he is an incredible leader with all kinds of prioritization and command skills. He's going to rock the cock off this weather vane. But first, Terezi needs to give him the briefing of what to do, and she tells him that he needs to find other people to join the red team so that they have 6 people on the red team, and that Karkat will apparently be the first to enter the game, and Terezi the second, and so on. Karkat finds it very fitting that he's the first in the game because he sees himself as a hero, even referring to the client disk as the hero program. And Terezi again makes another sarcastic jab, calling him dashing, courageous, and, if she's being perfectly honest, a little bit handsome. To which Karkat replies, "Yes, exactly, now you're making sense. This is the kind of thing that sane people say. Keep at it, there's hope for you yet." They have a few more jabs at each other, and then Karkat runs off to get some shit done. But then we skip forward in time to after Karkat's in. Karkat, the Night of Blood, in the land of pulse and haze. You see that Terezi is drawn all over his fucking hive, and however she's building doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense. And then we see him craft his new weapon, Home Smell You Later. Sick new sickle. And he starts talking to Terezi about his load gaper, as he calls it, though Terezi refers to it as a toilet. Apparently, the lower class trolls, yes, there's a class system. We'll get to that later. I'll explain that once all the trolls have been introduced. Well, yeah. Once most of the trolls have been introduced, I'll explain it better. Anyway, apparently the higher classes just refer to it as a toilet. So, yeah, the lower classes have all the weird, silly alien words, and then the higher classes use like the kind of stuff that we would actually use, which I guess, I don't know, just Hussey making the troll lore even sillier than it already was. Anyway, Karkat refers to the word toilet as blue-blooded vernacular. Terezi asks the color of Karkat's blood, but he says that's none of her business. She says she'll find out someday. She calls him adorable, prancing around with his little sickle, but he corrects her by saying adora bloodthirsty, which isn't a very good comeback. So Terezi just replies with a smiley face to make fun of him. But yeah, he starts complaining about how he hates being the first one in, even though he was all for it at first. But now that he's realized that Terezi has control over his whole house area, he fucking hates it. But yeah, he wants to be in control of someone else's place, but apparently he's going to be the last one to connect in the chain because that's how this works. Yeah, but we already know that pretty much. But just in case you forgot, basically, so what is going to happen is so we got Karkat going in, and then Terezi. Someone's going to get Terezi in, and then someone's going to get that person in, etc., etc. And then the sixth person is going to have to get in by Karkat, and that creates the loop. So everyone gets in, and everyone has a server and client player. Anyway, yeah. But then we go back into the past, and we see some troll girl flying around underground, and she apparently uses some psychic powers to take the head off of some frog ruins and throws it on the ground. We then see a bottle of Faygo laying at someone's feet. See, I told you we'd see the Faygo again. We see them reach down to pick it up, and they have the Aquarius sign on their ring. We then go back to the land of Pulse and Haze so that we can rewind a bit before his hive got all fucked up. And we go into Karkat's room. Well, we go into his hive and see him having a little strife with his Lucis, which is a large crab-like creature, because all of the trolls are not raised by other trolls. They're actually raised by these weird animals called Lucis, or Luci, plural. So yeah, apparently the adult trolls aren't around. And I don't remember exactly when it says it, so I'll go ahead and say it now. Basically, the adult trolls are all out in space, like conquering other planets and shit, because the trolls are a warrior race, or so we're told. And we then go over to meet Solix. And then we suddenly go to Nepeta, but then back to Solix. He was just being a little moody, but now he's down, so he's ready for us to be introduced to him. And we learn about what he's interested in. So, Solix is a coder and a programmer, and unlike Karkat, he's very good at it. And a sick hacker at that. But apparently, he constantly flips back and forth between self-deprecating and self-aggrandizing, and has bipolar mood swings. He has a penchant for bifurcation in logic and in life. He has a mutant mind, which is hounded by the psychic screams of the imminently deceased. He sees visions that foretell of the planet's looming annihilation. And yet, unlike the typical sightless prophet of doom, he is gifted with vision twofold. For now. He's just developed the game, which for the trolls is called Scrub instead of Spurb. SGURB. He believes that the game is the salvation of their race, though he's not sure how. He's helps to distribute the game into 2 teams, and he will be the leader of the blue team. His troll tag is Twin Armageddons, and he tends to speak with a bit of a lisp. Apologies to anyone who has a lisp, but that is how he speaketh. We then learn that Solix doesn't have a strife specibus or a Sylladex at all, because he has psionic powers that just let him pick stuff up and throw it around. And then, while swinging his big throwing stars, he accidentally cuts the beehives that make up the mainframe of his computer thing. He then looks down at the honey on his hands, and we learn that apparently You should never eat the mind honey under any circumstance. Apparently he cultivates this honey for his Lucis to help him not be a complete idiot all the time. He then snaps his fingers and causes all of the bees to fall asleep. Adorable. Now it's time to get back to work. Solix goes and sits down at his computer and starts talking to Terezi and asks her if she wants to be the leader of one of the teams for his game. She picks the red team before he even announces that there are going to be two teams. She said it was super obvious because basically everything that Solix does is red and blue themed. And she mentions how he really loves red and blue, but types in a mustardy yellow color because you guys probably don't really realize because you're not seeing the text. But every character has their own color that they type in. For example, Terezi types in this sort of turquoisey, or actually it's teal color, and Solix types in a sort of mustardy yellow. Anyway, he goes on this sort of tangent about maybe he doesn't like red and blue anymore. Maybe he's sick of them. And then after that little thing, Treasure's like, yeah, so anyway, you want me to be the leader? And then Solix tells her to pick out whoever she wants for the red team, and Solix will be leading the blue team. Terezi asks for clarification on what exactly the game is going to be about. Solix says he doesn't really know. All he knows is that the world will end, their race will die, and this is how to save it, supposedly. Of course, we know that's not true, as the kids are unable to save Earth, and it's unlikely that the trolls will be able to save Alternia. But Solix seems convinced otherwise. Also, apparently, they're all going to die, and Solix is going to die twice after becoming blind. And he refers to himself as a prophet of doom. And Terezi just kind of asks a bunch of questions and eventually brings up his victim complex, which he calls her out for bringing up something a bit too personal. She calls him sensitive, and then they sort of go their separate ways. We then go back over to this spooky ghost, Aradia, as we will come to know her. Spoilers by me. And she kicks the torso off the frog ruins. Why? Just cause. Aradia and Solix then start having a conversation where Aradia asks if he set up the two teams. He says yes, and mentions something about deleting this dimension, and asks if Aradia will be happier when they do so. Apparently, she may be able to leave the voices behind, whatever that means. But she says she's not really worried about that. She's kind of okay with it. She's okay with a lot of things, even their inevitable failure, even though it will briefly masquerade as victory. Solix calls her out for being really depressing all the time, which is something Terezi mentioned in the previous conversation about Aradia. Solix gets annoyed and asks her to lay off the spooky conundrums for the night. But Aradia calls him out. Saying he likes to talk to her and that this is a fact, not a question, because the voices told her. Solix gets mad and goes off on a little tirade. And then Aradia responds saying that she would like to see him actually happy. And he thanks her for saying so. She says that she forgets what anger feels like. And he asks if she's ever been angry in the first place. She says that she thinks she was once. Solix tells Aradia to ask Karkat about being angry because he's angry all the time, literally. But Aradia mentions that his anger serves a greater purpose in helping him to sabotage his own designs, which will sow the seeds of failure. A failure which, ironically, will prove to be mission critical. Aradia then mentions to Solix that this game will not save the world. In fact, it will do nothing but destroy it, and that the 12 trolls are both the pawns and the orchestrators of, quote-unquote, the Great Undoing. Solix says that he doesn't want to play anymore, and Aradia says there's nothing he can do about it. The meteors are en route, and it's inevitable that he'll play anyway. Aradia ends the conversation by saying, "I'm coming up," and Solix doesn't know what that means. But he quickly switches over to message Shrezzy and tell her that there's a change of plans. They're not playing the game anymore. But then Shrezzy says that she's not the leader anymore. Karkat is, because he threw a tantrum, and so she let him be the leader. She asks what's going on, and all he says is nothing. This game sucks and is full of crap. Solix then messages Karkat, telling him that they're not going to be playing the game anymore. But Karkat thinks that it's just an attempt to throw Karkat off his game, some sort of sabotage from Solix's end. Solix gets annoyed, trying to convince him that it's not a ruse and that he actually wants them to stop playing the game. And then he says that now that they're the leaders of opposing teams, and that he's going to stoop so low as to sabotage or attempt to sabotage Karkat, that he's going to end their friendship cancel, or that he's going to end their friendship canceled. And then Solix calls him out, saying that they've ended their friendship, quote unquote, like 1 billion times, and it's probably not going to actually mean anything. And also that Karkat isn't in a place to call out Solix's incompetence, because Karkat is a shitty programmer, and the only thing he's good at is yelling and making huge mistakes and being ugly and horrible in every way and having stupid little nubby horns. Then Karkat says that Solix probably never was actually that good of a programmer in the first place. He's probably been a fraud the whole time. And he opens up that program we saw from way back that Solix had made and is on Karkat's computer. And he tells Solix he's going to run it. Solix starts begging him not to do so. But then Karkat does, and his computer explodes. The explosion kills his Lucis, and we learn that every troll's Lucis will eventually die and then be prototyped in the kernel sprites. And while this would lead to a nice bittersweet reunion with their Luci, it also has the unfortunate effect of giving the underlings and warring royalty the benefits of the monstrous prototypings. Solix gets upset with himself about sending Karkat that code in the first place and starts deleting all the viruses from his computer to make sure no more crazy shenanigans can go off. And he notices this one virus, and there's a strange section of it where it's just sort of rifling through different pool balls or billiard balls, whatever you'd like to call them. It is apparently tied to the lifespan of the universe. When the universe dies, some weird sub-program will be executed. He deletes it, but it doesn't matter apparently because it's supposedly running elsewhere. But, I mean, what harm could it do if it is set to go off at the end of the universe? It's not like that'll be anytime soon. Wink, wink. But then we learn from the narration that this sub-program will apparently summon an indestructible demon into the recently voided universe, a being with power to travel through time. So he is inconvenienced very little by his arrival upon the Great Undoing. He has the entire universe from beginning to end to pick apart. The virus was essentially a formality because this demon is already here. Solix then hears his Lucis grumbling upstairs, and we go up and see Aradia has arrived at the top of Solix's hive stem thing. And then we go to, who's this? Kanaya, woo! And we see her place, which looks strangely similar to Jade's place. And we zoom out and we see a set of red frog ruins and a very strange desert, which, if you will remember, is the same desert we saw for a brief second in the intermission. But then we stop being Kanaya and we go over to this boy. His name is Tavros. Tavros Nitrum, to be specific. His interests include fairy tales and fantasy stories. He's got an acute ability to commune with creatures of Alternia. A skill he's used to capture and train many. They're all his friends, of course, and his warriors, which he uses in various card and role-playing games. He used to engage in more extreme role-playing, but then he had an accident. Probably the accident that put him in the wheelchair he's in currently. He also likes Alternian slam poetry. He has a profound fascination with the concept of flight and all lore surrounding it. He believes in fairies, even though they aren't real. As you can see, he has a bunch of fairy posters on his walls. I wonder if that's foreshadowing anything. His troll tag is Audios Toreador. And he speaks in a sort of faltering manner. Tavros goes over and starts playing Fidu Spawn, which is essentially a weird Alternian version of Pokemon where you throw down a thing and you summon this weird facehugger thing, and then the facehugger latches on this weird teddy bear, which causes Horseroni to burst from his chest. He then shuffles over and makes short work of the Fidu Sucker, which is the facehugger looking thing. He then Tavros then uses his awesome bestial communion abilities to bend the stallion to his whim, and then puts Tinkerbell and the stallion puts Tinkerbell and Horseroni to sleep. Good game, everybody. Tavros then rolls up his ramp and jumps into his Recupercoon. And as he does so, his wheelchair slides back down the ramp. And he has a bunch of trouble getting back into it, although we don't really see that. He then picks up his lance, which is his weapon of choice. He likes to practice jousting outside, and we see his jousting dummy. He then starts admiring his poster of Pupa Pan, which is basically just Peter Pan but trolls. We then skip into the future and see that later down the road, Tavros gets robot legs so he can walk again. We then see the means with which he got his normal legs taken off, where Kanaya, with her chainsaw, comes up to Tavros while he's asleep and cuts them off. Anyway, we go back to present, I guess, Tavros, and he begins having a conversation with Arachnid's Grip, aka Vriska. She then messages him saying that the red team is going to bite the dust, which means she's probably on the blue team, and says that the red team is full of losers like blind girls and lame boys and cranky imbeciles. Tavros says she's probably right, but he promised he wouldn't talk to her anymore. Promised who? You and Vriska both ask. Rufio, who is apparently which is apparently the name that Tavros gave his self-esteem, and also a Peter Pan reference if you've ever seen the movie Hook. Rufio is a character in that movie who is leading the Lost Boys after Peter Pan leaves, and he is played by Dante Bosco, who also is the voice of Prince Zuko in Avatar. Now you're caught up. Anyway, Vriska makes fun of Tavros for having an imaginary friend and for always believing in fake things. We then learn that apparently Kanaya was the one that told Tavros he should get an imaginary friend that is basically just a more confident version of himself. Vriska calls Kanaya a meddler, and Vriska says that next time Kanaya talks to Tavros, he should tell her to can it. And yeah, then Vriska talks about how flattering it must be to talk to her, and maybe that's why Kanaya is always bugging Vriska. But it's annoying. And then she says that Tavros is extremely boring, as per the usual. And so she's gonna go and get this freaking blue team shiz on the road. But apparently she hasn't actually been asked to join yet. So she's just kind of waiting for one of them to get to her. And yeah. Then she leaves, calling Tavros Tori a snore, and logs off before he can respond. Tavros then starts having a conversation with Gamzee. Gamzee apologizes for zoning out, and Tavros says it's okay because he didn't know he was supposed to not be zoned out in the first place. And then Gamzee tells Tavros that he's going to be on the red team. and they just have very whimsical, weird little conversation where basically nothing gets accomplished because that's just the two of them really like to meander in conversation. Like, I know Dave and Carcat like to go on their fucking rants and tirades, but like they usually get back to the point. But these two, it just fucking goes off, and then they start having like a fucking rap battle, and I just don't care. I'm not sorry. Moving on, we see Terezi in the woods around her house, which are now on fire, and she approaches a large doomsday scale. On one side is the skull of a mother grub, on the other side is the egg of her Lucis, who is not hatched yet. But we see the egg begin to crack, and we learn that the egg contains a rare species of dragon that will serve as her Lucis. But even though the dragon never hatched, Terezi and the dragon have always had a mental connection. And after the accident in which Terezi went blind, the dragon used this to help teach Terezi how to see the world without vision. We see the dragon hatch from the egg and fly off, and then get hit by a meteor, which genuinely distresses Terezi. Later she would be prototyped into the Colonel Sprite. We then be the other girl, who is Aradia, and we see her standing atop the frog ruin that she has desecrated. Aradia Megiddo, I assume that's how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure. Sorry. Aradia once had a number of interests, which in time she has lost interest in. She once perhaps had a fondness for archaeology. But nonetheless, she is only interested in her present calling, which came through the discovery of some mystic ruins, which she recently desecrated out of boredom. She is guided by the voices of the dead, which she has been able to hear since she was young, and they tell her of the great undoing. Apparently this escalated after an accident during a certain kind of role-playing. The accident resulted in the death of her Lucis, which prompted her to leave her home and take up these ruins as residence. She then discovered mysterious technology in the ruins, which she gave to Solix, and Solix then used the codes to make Scrub, which is the game, is the Trolls version of Spurb, in case you forgot. And thus starting the end of the world, though it was going to end regardless, so hey. Her troll tag is Apocalypse Arisen. And there is a typically pronounced hollowness to her words. She retrieves her computer from her Ouija fetch modus. And we see a familiar looking computer, if you remember this from the intermission. Hoo. She then starts having a conversation with Kanaya. Kanaya asks if there's anything that she can do to change the events that are coming, but they both know there's no way to change it. Kanaya tries to get through Aradia's strange demeanor, but fails to do so. And then she has the conversation with Solix that ends with her saying, "I'm coming up." We then cut to after that conversation, where we see Aradia use her psychic powers that she has, because like half the trolls have psychic powers. I guess I've skinned over that a little. Anyway, she uses her psychic powers to lift Solix is Lucis up in the air, just out of boredom for no reason. She then has a conversation with Vriska. And basically all that happens here is that Vriska tries to talk about the team stuff and sort of vaguely brings up the accident and seems convinced that Aradia is really mad about Vriska after the accident, though Aradia says she is not. And we sort of get the feeling that it's less that Aradia is mad at Vriska, but more that Vriska is upset that Aradia isn't mad about it. She then says she's going to go bug the co-leader about, and says that she will be giving Aradia a present later. What could this present be? And who is the co-leader? We then switch over and we see Vriska typing at her computer. But for now, that's all we're going to see. We will be her later. Solix then messages Aradia saying that he would like to apologize for flying off the handle earlier. And that he hopes that they are friends still, and Aradia says they are. And Solix says that he's decided he is going to play the game after all. But Aradia says that he can't play yet. He has to wait because it's not his time to enter the game. He says that he definitely is. And she says he is not. And to come to the window because she is outside. He calls BS, saying he doesn't see anything. But she says if he comes closer, he'll see her. He walks over to the window. And she uses her power to put Solix to sleep next to the bees. She also apparently put Solix's Lucis to sleep. He wakes up later down the road, having accidentally slurped up some of the mind honey, which causes his mutant powers to go awry, shooting a huge hole in the top of his hive stem, killing his Lucis by accident. We then go over to meet this little furry troll named Nepeta Leon. Nepeta lives in a cave that acts as her hive, but it's mostly just a cave. She likes friendly role-playing, but never the dangerous kind, too dangerous. She likes to prowl the wilderness for great beasts and stalk them and take them down with nothing but her sharp claws and teeth. She eats them and then wears the pelts, and she also likes to paint wall comics using blood and soot and ash, depicting exciting tales from the hunt and other goofy stories about her and her pals. Her best pal of all is a little bossy, and people wonder why she even bothers with him, but someone has to keep him pacified. Who could that be? Who? Hint, it's not Carcat, but someone else that we haven't met yet. Her troll tag is Arsenic Catnip. And she always has asterisks around the stuff she types because she's always role-playing. Her weapon of choice is the claw gloves that she's always wearing. Wolverine style. Woohoo. She then goes over to her Lucis, who is like a little cat thing, and scritches it behind the ears. We then cut to the future after a cave-in, which kills her Lucis. We then go back to the past, before the Lucis is dead, and Nepeta has a little conversation with Carcat, where all he says is hey, and she immediately starts off role-playing about chasing something that she sees bounce into one of Carcat's shoes. Carcat attempts to roleplay and is bad at it because he takes himself way too seriously, and really all he does is just complain about how bad it is, and says that he's befuddled by the fact that Nepeta is currently the best remaining candidate for the red team, which throws her off. Nepeta roleplays gathering up a bunch of brick pieces and building a cute little house, and then inviting Karkat inside. And then Karkat briefs her on what's going down, and that so currently Karkat has gotten into the game. He was put in by Terezi, and then Gamzee got Terezi into the game, and then Tavros got Gamzee into the game, and now Nepeta needs to get Tavros into the game. And Nepeta says that she would really like to right away, but she's been procrastinating, or she says procrastinating. She makes cat puns. Talking to someone else about playing the game. Karkat asks how she can put up with that asshole, and says that this guy is apparently even a bigger asshole than Karkat, and even calls him scum. Nepeta says he's not that bad. Karkat says, do whatever you gotta do. Tavros is waiting. Nepeta then contacts the other friend, who is apparently the bigger asshole here. His troll tag is Centaur's Testicle, but we will call him by his name, Equius. Nepeta then starts talking to Equius, trying to use a bunch of cute role-playing stuff to get him in a good mood, but he seems to hate it even more than Karkat, and demands that she stops immediately. And when I say demands, I mean he says the words, "You'll stop now." Nepeta says that apparently Equius has never played along even once, and says that even Karkat does it sometimes, even if he's mean and insincere about it. But at least it's still fun. Nepeta says that even though Equius tries to put on a tough guy act, she's convinced that deep down he actually likes to play games and stuff too. It's just he's just so caught up in this whole act he's putting on. Equius seems to not care for Nepeta talking to Karkat or any of the other quote-unquote base classes, and saying that they have loosened her morals. Nepeta says that she doesn't care about classes or blood color or whatever, and that the classes don't really matter. So I don't remember when it's exactly stated, so I'll just kind of drop it now. There is a class system on Alternia based on blood color. Different trolls have different blood color. So of the trolls we've met thus far, everyone except Karkat types in their blood color. So Aradia types in a sort of brownish red color, which is the lowest class on the blood caste system. Tavros in a brown, which is the second lowest. Solix types in a yellow, third lowest. Karkat we don't know because he types in a gray, which is not his blood color. We will learn that eventually, but he keeps his blood color a secret, as Terezi did mention in a previous conversation. Kanaya, who types in a green color. We have Nepeta, who types in a sort of darker green color. We have Terezi, who types in teal. Vriska, who types in blue. Equius, who types in indigo. Gamzee, who types in and then two other people we haven't met yet who type in two other colors. Yeah, at some point in this act I will lay out the caste system for you guys, just so you know where everyone lays. I might even do a little thing on screen. Anyway, they kind of have a big back and forth about how Equius never has any fun and blah blah blah. Nepeta brings up how he likes archery, and that's basically a game, but he says that it is not a game. It is a very dignified sport, and demands that they stop talking about archery at once because the topic is making him sweat. Nepeta says that he's lucky to have her around because no one else likes him. They all know him as a weirdo and a creep. Nepeta gets mad and says that she's going to play the game without his approval on the red team, but Equius demands that she be on the blue team because apparently the blue team is superior. Because I guess basically Equius is trying to split the teams up into into the people he likes and the people he doesn't, and apparently he hates basically everyone on the red team. So he wants Nepeta on the blue team because that's where he is, and because he likes her, he wants her on that team and not affiliating with all these other people that he hates. Which is very strange because Solix is on the blue team, and Solix, I just mentioned, is very low on the blood caste system, and Equius is a fucking racist and he hates low blood caste people. But I guess he likes everyone else who's supposedly on the blue team. Anyway, eventually Equius, being a fucking asshole and stubborn as shit, gets Nepeta to give up, and she tells Tavros that she won't be able to be on the red team and get him into the game, and they'll have to get someone else. Tavros then fondly recalls his days of yore when he was into flirping. Apparently, they were broken up into two teams. Team Scourge and Team Charge. Tavros and Aradia were Team Charge. Vriska and Terezi were Team Scourge. Apparently, Tavros and Vriska are having a game while Terezi and Aradia are having their own game. And Tavros heads outside and begins the adventure. And a little while later, we see that he is standing on the edge of a cliff near his hive, and that he is in some dire straits as he's apparently losing. Vriska gets mad, telling him it's his turn and he needs to take it, but he complains, saying it's way too hard and there's no way he can win. And then Tavros tries talking to Aradia, but she never responds. We then see Vriska, a hologram of Vriska, show up, and she says that if he doesn't take his turn, she'll take his turn for him. And apparently she can use her powers to control Tavros if need be. He gets mad, saying that's cheating, but if he's going to refuse to roll, there's no choice, and she uses her powers to mind control Tavros, making a joke about how he looks like Puha Pan, so why doesn't he fly, and causes Tavros to jump off the cliff while she screams, "Fly, Pupa, fly." Tavros falls to the beach below and breaks his legs. Tavros then messages Karkat, saying that he can't feel his legs. Karkat just responds, "Hey asshole, stop playing games for girls," and signs off. Back in the present. Yada yada. We see Karkat finish a conversation with Terezi we already saw, and then he starts having a conversation with Vriska. She messages Karkat asking if she can join the red team, which is strange because earlier she wanted to join the blue team, didn't she? Karkat calls her a vile, backstabbing sociopath. And she attempts to win him over with cagey cutesy bullshit, as Karkat puts it. Vriska says she doesn't know how they're supposed to be becoming friends if he recoils from her olive branch like she's twitching a mummified bovine phallus in his direction. But Karkat says they will never become friends. Vriska says not even hate friends. And Karkat says no, more like twitchy-eyed projectile vomiting and utter disgust friends while he perforates his bone bulge with a coaling fork. A bone bulge is essentially his dick. So yeah. And then she says she's joking that she's already on the blue team, so whatever, she doesn't care anyway. She says that her and Aradia will be co-leaders, but really she will be the leader, and that apparently she's planning to take over as the leader. She thinks she's going to be pulling a fast one on Aradia. And then Karkat goes off on a tangent about how she's a fucking psychopath and he hates having anything to do with her, and tells her not to try any mind control tricks on any of the red team's players. She says that she can't control just anyone, they have to be impressionable like Karkat. But Karkat says she can't control him. She says she can, but she just chooses not to. Karkat doesn't buy it. Karkat threatens her, saying he's got the better of the Scourge sisters on his team, and if they break the truce of not using mind control powers, that Karkat will make sure Terezi comes after Vriska, and that Vriska is unable to stand up to Terezi. Apparently, Terezi always outwits her in the end. Vriska doesn't respond, so Karkat signs off, feeling as though he's won the argument after saying bye, idiot. Then we see him log back on. Apparently, Vriska can't control him, and she made him hit the button to log back in. And then she starts being cheeky about it. And then she signs off before Karkat can sign off again. And then we be the other asshole but the narration decides that that's a terrible idea, so we don't do that. And then we see some weird cuttlefish type thing and another troll we haven't met yet. Then we go back to Aradia, who's riding the fucking frog head thing back to her hive, and she begins connecting to her server player, who is Nepeta. And then she uses her psychic powers to pick up the frog head and prototypes it. And then she prototypes herself later down the road. We learn that Nepeta could not see Aradia this whole time because Aradia was actually a ghost the entire time, but nobody is surprised. Big shocker. And now she's this frog Aradia ghost thing, sprite, whatever. We then be the huge bitch, aka Vriska Circuit. Vriska enjoys extreme role-playing. She's persisted with the habit in spite of the accident, but apparently she doesn't have much of a choice. Her Lucis is very hungry all the time and can only be appeased by the flesh of young trolls. She uses her campaigns as a way of orchestrating the demise of the impressionable, aka she tricks other players into getting sacrificed to her Lucis, who is apparently a giant spider. She's also apparently fascinated by end-of-the-world scenarios and enjoys constructing doomsday devices just for fun. She likes 8 balls, as you can see on here in the picture. And she apparently has Vision 8-fold. She likes to destroy the 8 balls because of their puzzling, guaranteed inaccuracy. and breaking them has apparently developed into a habit bordering on fetishistic. And with each she destroys, she adds an insurmountable stockpile of terrible luck. Her troll tag is Arachnid's Grip, and her statements tend to be just a little bit overdramatic. She goes over to the wall and checks out a drawing she made of her RP character. Marquise Spinneret Mindfang, who's basically just her with a hook hand. She then steps on a D4 accidentally. Fucking, you deserve it. Die. Anyway, she goes over to her computer and picks up her dice, which are her weapon. How does that work? We'll see later. She then gets a message from somebody. There's no symbol this time like there normally is. And this person types in white text, which makes it really hard to read. So you have to like highlight the text. But you guys don't have to deal with that. Just me. He also doesn't have like a handle name or whatever like everyone else. It's just text. So isn't that fun? He says that this is the last time they will ever talk. She asks why he messaged her then. And he says it's a parting courtesy. And that all the ways he's exploited her were meant to bring about the events that will take place this evening. Knowing this will provide context for the events in her near future and will affect how she behaves in response. And that all of this is important, and that he has gone to great lengths. Vriska insists that she was not exploited. All she did was humor him. But he insists that she was exploited, and it was very easy, which sets her off. But says that there's no need for her to be like this, because he just has one thing to say, and he will be brief. Saying that he no longer holds her accountable for her wrongdoings, and has given her transgression very little thought since the incident. She gets mad and starts going off again. He says that it was her simplistic temperament that made her easy to control, vicious and predictable like an insect. It takes no skilled strategist to manipulate an insect, and then she was a waste of his talents. He will say one last thing. Though the magnitude of the ensuing destruction resulting directly from her actions will be neither possible or necessary for her to fathom, there nevertheless ought to be a silver lining. The only question is whether she will live long enough to see it. He's not a gambling man, but if he was, he wouldn't bet on it. And then he leaves. Well, that was cagey as fuck. She then goes to break an 8-ball, but she just doesn't have it in her at this point. She then has a conversation with Kanaya, who asks if her Lucis is dead, because apparently Kanaya's is. Vriska asks if it was some sort of sabotage or something, but apparently it was just her time to go. And they have a little conversation about the game and what's to come. And Vriska says she's worried about her Lucis, even though she doesn't really like her. It's still a little worrying knowing that she might be dead or die soon. Kanaya assures Vriska that these events are inevitable and that they have nothing to do with bad luck. And that, in fact, all of the things that she attributes to bad luck are just things that are totally unrelated. But, yeah. And we get a glimpse into Kanaya's penchant for meddling with dangerous girls, as we will get more accustomed to later. Vriska goes to check on her Lucis, and we see her doomsday machine, and we see that her Lucis is fine and well down below the cliffs on which the The hives around are built. Well, 2 hives at least. We see the Lucis has set up a series of webs and such. And we see the other nearby hive next to Vriska's is Equius's hive. And boy is it something. It's not for the faint of heart, I'll tell you that much. His name is Equius the Hawk. He loves being strong. He hopes to one day become an arch-eradicator, the most noble echelon of the Imperial forces. But he sucks at archery because every time he picks up a bow, he breaks it because he's too strong. And apparently he just breaks everything around him. He has a great appreciation for the fine arts. He uses his aristocratic connections to acquire priceless masterpieces, like painted in the oldest and most respected Alternian tradition of nude muscle beast portraits. God damn it. I'm gonna skim over this fucking shit. Alright, anyway. He's strong and he gets angry easy and he likes horse porn and he builds robots. He then starts calling for his Lucis Arthur, who is this guy here. Arthur is a muscle beast, which is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, type of Lucis you can have. And he brings Equius his milk. Equius takes the milk and pats Arthur on the head, leaving a hand-shaped bruise. Now again, Arthur is among one of the strongest Lucis types in existence, yet just a pat from Equius leaves a bruise. So that should tell you how strong Equius is. Equius drinks like half of his milk and then shatters the glass. And then flies into a rage because he didn't get to finish his milk. He equips a bow to try and calm himself down, but his bow is broken in half. He then goes and has the conversation with the PETA where he tells her that she can't play the game. Equius has a conversation with Gamzee. He starts it off by telling Gamzee how much he fucking hates him. And then Gamzee's like, yo man, you seem like you're in a bad mood. You want to fucking talk about it? And he's like, yeah, okay, sure. But first they get into some fucking role playing, dude. But not the Nepeta kind of role playing. This is it's a little kinkier. So basically, Equius asks Gamzee to Gamzee being a high blood and Equius having a kink for those superior to him, talking down to him. He gets Gamzee to start like berating him. Gamzee's not very good at it, but it seems to work well enough for Equius. And then Equius tries to get some stuff out of his chest, but he's not very good at explaining his feelings. Basically, he just says that it's really fucked up how a high blood like Gamzee can be so detestable, while a low blood like her could possess nothing but grace and admirable mannerisms. And by her, he means a member of the most abject Verminous bloodline of all. Now, who did I mention earlier was of the lowest blood caste? Well, if you don't remember, we'll find out later. He then has a conversation with Vriska. She messages him asking about Aradia's present and if it's done yet. He says it is done and it will be delivered shortly, but he doesn't understand why she's intent on this present, especially for such a worthless peasant. That rhymed. Vriska then talks to Aqueous about how the two of them are going to be co-leaders of the blue team after usurping Aradia. Now, if you remember earlier, Vriska talked about Aradia and her being the co-leaders, so she's planning to usurp Aradia. But if I remember right, we've already seen the conversation wherein Vriska says that she's going to be taking over and not Aradia. And then Aradia's like, yeah, I don't care. So yeah. Obviously, I don't think Aradia really cares one way or the other. Anyway. Vriska asks Aqueous if he's trying to plan anything sneaky. He says no. And then a few moments later, he says that he can feel her trying to read his mind, but it doesn't work. And we learn that Vriska's robotic arm that she has here was actually made by Aqueous, and he makes it slap her in the face. Aqueous then delves deeper into his lair, where we see he has a bunch of robots that he's built. Apparently, he likes to wrestle robots. He also is fully aware that Vriska plans to double-cross him and has made his own plans to double-cross her. He's going to deliver the Aradia's present to her himself to gain her favor, and then double-cross Aradia to take his rightful position as team leader. He finds it ironic that someone of his blood purity must work to win the favor of a low-class peasant. Humiliating, strangely titillating even. Oh, Aqueous, you and your kinks. But in the end, he intends to restore class order. We see the Aradia robot, who we will deem Aradiabot. He then grabs it, bends it backwards, and gives it a smooch. And talks about how I can't do this part with a straight face. So basically he's got this weird fucking kink where he's all into like getting talked down to by the high bloods, but he also has like a kink for like getting down and dirty with a low blood like Aradia. But his plan to sort of fix this is that so basically, you know, Aradia is a ghost. And Aqueous and Vriska are currently aware of this fact. Aqueous intends to give her the robot body so she can inhabit it and have a, you know, physical body. And the robot body has blue blood pulsing through it, which would, in Aqueous's eyes, make her a blue blood. And in this way, their moonlighting, or whatever you want to call it, would be totally legitimate in the eyes of a racist like Aqueous. Moving on. He starts yelling at one of the other robots for judging him. And then he beats the shit out of it. And it goes flying out and explodes, which causes Vriska's Doomsday device to go off. Nothing actually happens though, except that it short circuits and then falls down, creating an avalanche, which then removes part of Aqueous's house and crushes Vriska's Spider Lucis, as well as sending Arthur falling out to his death as well. Rest in peace, Arthur. A moment of silence. Moments earlier, Terezi, in her world, I don't remember the name of, but it's not important, has a conversation with Vriska. Hoo. Vriska says that tonight they'll have to break their truce because tonight they will be playing a game together, but Terezi says that the truce isn't about not playing games together. It's about not stabbing each other in the back anymore, and ending the endless cycle of revenge, and also for Vriska not to use her powers to like hurt people who don't deserve it, because Vriska's a bitch. Vriska insists that she's sorry and totally fucking sincere, but Terezi doesn't believe that shit for a gosh dang second. Vriska says that to prove how sorry she is, she's giving Aradia a present. And Terezi says that she doesn't know why Vriska would bother because it's not like Aradia is going to actually care. Terezi, being unaware that Aradia is a ghost, thinks that whatever happened to Aradia that was apparently Vriska's fault did something to her that just sort of made her nonplussed all the time. Also, there's a hint that Terezi's blindness and Vriska having to wear an eye patch are the results of their constant revenge and getting back at each other. Anyway, Vriska insists that one day Terezi will end up in Vriska's side of the situation where Terezi will do something bad to someone and then try really hard to win their trust back, and then she'll see it from Vriska's point of view. Terezi says she doubts it, and they go their separate ways. Vriska then logs back on to mention that there was apparently a large explosion, which of course we know was the avalanche that killed her spider Lucis. We then have a flashback to when Terezi wasn't blind. In fact, I'm so used to her being blind that when I clicked over and this page showed up, it like almost scared me seeing her with eyes. Anyway, she's having a conversation with Aradia about Tavros' accident, and basically Terezi says that she has a way to get back at Vriska. Aradia seems to think that even if they get back at her, she wins regardless, because if they don't do anything, she wins. If they get back at her, she wins. But Terezi is absolutely certain that what she's about to do will definitely put Vriska in the losing position, and that she's absolutely done with Vriska and wants basically nothing to do with her, especially when it comes to playing games together. We then go over to Aradia before she died in her house, and she decides to get her own revenge against Vriska, using her power as a rust blood to commune with the dead, which is a thing they can do. And she summons a bunch of ghosts that show up and start haunting Vriska. And in fact, they are the ghosts of trolls that Vriska has fed to her spider Lucis. Vriska then gets a message from the white text guy and convinces Vriska to make her pay. Of course, at first, Vriska and the white text guy go back and forth, and Vriska insists that it's not even worth it because Aradia's way of getting back at her isn't even like that big a deal or whatever. But it totally is, and eventually the white text guy gets under Vriska's skin enough that she decides to go through with it. White text guy also mentions that he knows Vriska is going to kill Aradia because he knows that he has seen the future and he knows that it happens. So the white text guy sort of seems to have the position on the trolls that the trolls have on the kids, wherein the white text guy knows the trolls' timeline and the trolls know the kids' timeline. So who could this white text guy possibly be? Perhaps another alien? I suppose we'll find out. Maybe it's John from the future. Ha ha. That'd be stupid. Alright, anyway, so Vriska's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. So she messages Aradia and is like, hey, nice trick. I've got a message for you from your boyfriend. Solix is basically Aradia's boyfriend, just for context. And so tells Aradia to look outside. Aradia doesn't really believe it, but she goes and looks outside anyway. And who do we see there but Solix floating in the air? Solix, currently being mind controlled by Vriska, is then forced into using his laser eye things to shoot Aradia, killing her. Of course, we don't directly see that, but it can be presumed because we do know that Aradia is dead, and we do see Solix floating there charging up his eye lasers. And I'm sorry, but if you want to all the suspense of reading the actual webcomic, you should have read the actual webcomic. We then go to be the white text guy, but we cannot be the white text guy. No one can be the white text guy except for the white text guy. The white text guy is known as Doc Scratch, an officer of an indestructible demon known as Lord English. Where have we heard that name before? His job is to pave the way for the arrival of his master, who will be summoned at the termination of the universe. So basically, Doc Scratch is working to get Lord English summoned. Scratch is also Alternia's first guardian, and every planet, destined for intelligent life at least, has such an entity meant to protect it, and to facilitate the planet's ultimate purpose, which is, of course, playing the game. A first guardian is typically almost as old as the planet itself, and each has a unique circuitous origin to the knots of paradox space. They come in many different forms and shapes, though they all share a common, especially potent genetic sequence. Grants them near omnipotence, and when merged with a host of great intelligence, near omniscience as well. What will he do? There's not much we can do about it except sit back and watch. He's apparently playing a game of chess on this 3D plane, which, if you remember, is reminiscent of the battlefield, because at a certain point in the battlefield's evolution, it becomes a cube. It then appears that he is being contacted by Terezi on his typewriter. Doc Scratch asks Terezi how she was able to contact him, but then says, never mind, I figured it out instantly. He's kind of a dick and likes to rub his omniscience and omnipotence in people's faces, so get used to that, I guess, because he'll be around for a minute. Terezi doesn't really care. She's here to feed some information to Terezi, something he surprisingly doesn't know, which takes him by surprise for a moment. And she uses her trickstery wit to start goading him, and we learn that there are in fact things that he does not know, little pockets of darkness, if you will. Well, little pockets of void, if you will. But then he gets interrupted for a moment as she has a conversation with Vriska where she asks why Vriska did it. Apparently, it's not the first time she's messaged Vriska about this either. Vriska doesn't really seem that remorseful, and Terezi says that she doesn't know why she's been bothering beyond hoping that Vriska may somehow say something that changes Terezi's mind. Vriska and Terezi kind of go back and forth about how Terezi wants to get back at Vriska. Vriska doesn't think Terezi has any real way of getting back at her, because Vriska has an advantage in terms of powers, even though Vriska can't mind control Terezi. Vriska does have psychic abilities and Trezzy does not. Trezzy tells Vriska to consult her little advantage if she wants to know whether or not Trezzy is bluffing about being able to get back at her. Vriska says she doesn't need to know that Trezzy's bluffing, but Trezzy says that she will anyway because addiction is a powerful thing. Of course, we then immediately see Vriska pick up her white cue ball and attempt to peer into the son of a bitch like a magic 8-ball. How does this work? Well, because she has vision 8-fold, she can see through it to the truth beneath. We then see that the truth beneath tells her that she should in fact be worried about Trezzy's threat. Trezzy then informs Doc Scratch that Trezzy has said cue ball, and Doc Scratch flips the fuck out. The cue ball, as Vriska is attempting to appear into it, shows another message saying, "I will explode in your face," and it does so. And that is why Vriska wears an eye patch. We then go back to the future as Equius and Vriska approach their dead Luci. Well, Vriska's isn't quite dead yet, and she goes to put it out of its misery. She rolls her dice and summons her Guillotine de la Marquise, which cuts its head off. Au revoir, Spider Mom. Of course, Vriska fucks up everything she touches, so this actually causes another avalanche which sends Equius' entire house falling down towards Vriska, but at the last second, Equius enters the game, and Vriska does not get crushed. Vriska messages Aradia, very upset because Aradia was Equius' server player. Mad that Equius' house was zapped in. Aradia is not sure why she's upset, but then she almost let slip that Equius was the one that built the present and not Vriska, and then covers it up by saying that Equius was holding on to the present for her for a while. Vriska thinks that Aradia is doing all of this just to get back at her, but Aradia still doesn't care and is just doing things because Aradia is the time person and she is just insistent on doing things as the timeline demands. Also, we learn that Vriska is not going to be on the blue team, and Vriska takes this as Aradia kicking her off, but then Aradia insists that she was never going to be on the blue team, that she was always going to be on the red team, and that was how it was always meant to go, regardless of what Vriska thought. Vriska is very upset about this because literally everyone on the red team hates Vriska and has some vendetta against her, except Gamzee, I guess. Gamzee is just Gamzee. And at least for now, he's just fucking high all the time and doesn't give a shit about anything. Vriska gets very mad. And then goes off and then logs off. Once Equius has entered his land, the land of caves and silence, he messages Aradia saying that he will be the leader now and they will not be co-leaders as originally planned, and she is totally okay with that, which kind of gets him off because he gets off on the idea of high bloods commanding low bloods. He also mistakes the term server player as one who serves as opposed to being the one to manipulate the environment. And then when he learns that Aradia is technically in charge of him because she can manipulate his environment, that also gets him off because of his other kink, and yeah. He starts sweating a lot, which is a thing he does when his kinks get the better of him. And because Arthur's not around to bring him his milk and towels, he's having trouble, taking hold of it. Aradia says that he should try to calm down by breaking something, and asks if maybe her breaking something would make him feel better. And he apparently likes the idea. So she throws his bathtub through the wall, and that helps calm him down. And she sort of unwittingly plays into his kink by using phrases like, "Is that an order?" and yada yada. And then he sort of keeps going back and forth about whether he hates her or adores her, and she doesn't really get it, and she just kind of breaks a few things just to help him calm down so they can continue. And he gets a little kinky for a little bit longer, and then we move on and we see him being super strong and, you know, all that jazz. And he finds his fucking second gate really fast, bringing the Aradia bot with him. Aradia enters the robot, and as she does so, Aquia starts asking if she feels any stirring sensations, such as sensations which may be stirred by flowing blood and a beating heart, and perhaps smoldering passion. We then learn that not only did he put blue blood into the robot, but he also programmed it to have feelings, romantic feelings for Equius. So now fucking Aradia starts having a freak out, rips out her own heart and starts pounding it, starts beating the shit out of Equius because she just is so upset about these fucking creepy nagging thoughts that she's having that are telling her to have romantic feelings for Equius, which go against like basically everything she's felt up to this point, which was basically nothing. And now we get to see her be angry for the first time, at least from our perspective. And she's then, after beating the shit out of Equius, they fucking start making out. And you know what? I need a moment. Okay, so we go to Nepeta, who updates her shipping wall because yes, that's a thing she has. And we can look at some of these, like the top row up here. We see like Karkat and Vriska with a heart, and then we see this other one over here where it's like a weird white diamond. We'll get to that later. Don't worry about it. Anyway, she circles Equius and Aradia and is very confused about it because she didn't expect this to come to fruition. Karkat then messages Vriska saying that sadly they don't have any other choice and they need her on the red team. And to Karkat's surprise and amusement, Vriska's like, well, I don't have any fucking choice because Aradia kicked me off the blue team. And at first Karkat was trying to be nice to win Vriska over, but now he's fucking yucking it up, man. He loves it. And then she mentions her dead spider mom, and Karkat says that she can just put the body into the Colonel sprite and bring her back. He then tells Vriska to clean herself up and then get started playing the game. And then she makes a joke about how her blood is the prettiest blood and there's no need to clean it off. And then they get into the whole thing about Karkat hiding his blood and yada yada. And then Karkat gets into like his own sort of shipping thing. Apparently he considers himself like a fucking savant on romance. And yeah, says that he doesn't think Vriska is capable of having quote unquote a mate sprit or anything of the sort. and that her hate is too dull for a proper quote-unquote Christmases. And he doesn't see her landing a more rail, quote-unquote, either. What do these words mean? Well, you're going to have to find out later. Troll romance. Woohoo. Anyway. Karkat then mentions a double agent named Jack, which we know a Jack from the kids session, but we know that the troll's Jack and the kid's Jack played out very differently. We also see that Karkat is bleeding, but we don't get to see what color his blood is. Karkat needs Vriska's powers to mind control Jack and the like. Karkat then mentions to Vriska that Jack stabbed Karkat, but it's okay because they're totally cool now. Vriska says that now that Karkat's bleeding, she should ask Terezi what Karkat's blood color is, since Terezi, is Karkat's server player, but because Karkat isn't at his house, Terezi can't actually see him. Then Vriska mentions the viewport feature on Trollian, but Karkat says that Solix is probably the only person who knows how to work that, and he's been MIA for hours. Karkat also seems to find the viewport feature invasive and largely pointless, and tells Vriska to get her ass in here so they can dethrone the goddamn queen, so that the final boss fight is much easier. Then we then go back a few minutes, and we see Jack just after he stabbed Karkat. Karkat starts yelling about how he doesn't want Jack to look at the blood because it's a freakish color and blah blah blah. Jack looks at his knife, but he's confused because his knife just has red blood on it, which isn't anything special. And we learn that Karkat's blood is red, which is apparently a mutation for trolls. They don't naturally have red blood. Now we know why Karkat hides his blood, because he's a mutant, candy-redded son of a bitch. Jack then cuts open his own hand with the knife. Karkat, seeing that Jack also has red blood, feels a sort of kinsmanship with Jack, and the two shake their bloody hands together and make a pact. They then orchestrate a plan called Operation Regisurp, in which they will eventually take down the Black Queen to make the final boss fight easier, so that they only have to fight the Black King and not both the Black King and the Black Queen. Because if you'll remember, the Black King and Black Queen in this are prototyped with 12 big-ass fucking monsters, because the Trolls' guardians are the Luci, and, they're big monster things. Which means they're going to be pretty fucking hard to fight, especially with both of them. But they managed to pilfer the ring, because apparently the Queen doesn't wear the ring at all times, because apparently one of the prototypings was so vile and disgusting that the Black Queen could not bring herself to wear the ring at all hours. Which of the disgusting monstrous Luci was the one that put her over the edge? Well, it was none of them. It was actually the frog head that Aradia prototyped. We learn that the Dursites hate frogs. In their minds, they are the most loathsome creatures in existence. So vile in their appearance, so contemptible in purpose, all depictions, let alone members of its population, are permanently banned from any jurisdiction in the reach of her agents. Creatures of this kind go by many names, and so does the reviled patron god they herald. The Great Detestation, King Pawn Squatter, Speaker of the Vast Joke, or most commonly, Bilious Slick. His true name is, of course, forbidden, and wearing his face is where she drew the line. She kept it in a vault, where she thought it would be safe, but it turns out it was not. We then later see her exiled on Alternia way down the line, and as she begins her exiling, she meets Doc Scratch and is given a new purpose. But at the onset, they would know nothing of this, or the existence of the Queen's 12-orbed ring. Because why would the Queen have a 12-orbed ring if each team is only of 6 players? Well, it turns out that there are no teams in actuality. It actually creates what we will refer to as a Mobius double reach around. And here you can see the order that it sort of loops. Instead of Karkat being Vriska's server player, as you would have assumed with the red team being their own thing, Karkat is Solix's server player, and Equius is Vriska's server player. Who. What a twist. But then when you look at these last two people we haven't met yet, but we will learn about them later. Kanaya. Sorry, I mixed up Kanaya and Vriska's thingies. Equius is Kanaya's server player. My B. Anyway, not super important. Moving on. It's time to finally get to know Kanaya personally. Kanaya Merriam. We see that she has a very colorful room. She appears to like knitting. She has a sewing machine in the least. So I guess sewing, not knitting. Those are two different things. I guess. Probably, yes. Anyway, she likes fashion. She also is the only troll that we see moving around during the daytime. And I don't think I actually mentioned this, but trolls are nocturnal except for Kanaya. Now, why is this? Well, she's weird. That's about it. She's just a weirdo. Anyway, we get to learn all about the things that she's interested in. Like hunting down the undead, which are apparently a thing that roam around during the day on Alternia, at least in the desert that she lives in. And she likes to kill them with her chainsaw. Or at least she thinks it'd be cool to do so, but it's very dangerous, so she doesn't really do that. She likes to read about rainbow drinkers, shadow droppers, and forbidden passion. She is one of the few of her kind with jade green blood. Now, jade blood is not a mutation, but it is rare because jade-blooded trolls are linked to the mother grubs, and the mother grubs are the creatures that perpetuate the birth of trolls, because trolls do not just fuck. No. There is an incestuous slurry that is delivered to the mother grub, which then creates a bunch of trolls. But we'll get into that more later, I believe. For now, just remember the term incestuous slurry. And we will move on. Incestuous slurry. Okay, anyway, so she likes fashion, design, lively, colorful patterns. She likes to decorate her hive with flora and fabric. She is a seamstress, or a rag ripper, or a tree trimmer, or a lumberjack, whichever she cares to be. And she's got a lot of technology. And her Lucis is a virgin mother grub, because apparently some mother grubs will choose to not go through their duties and instead will adopt a Jade Blood to raise. Her troll tag is Grim Auxiliatrix, and she tends to enunciate each word she speaks very clearly and carefully. What will she do? We see that her chainsaw also functions as a lipstick thingy, and it can go back and forth between the two. She also has a wardrobifier like Jade, but instead of just changing the symbol on her shirt, it changes her entire outfit. She then paints her lips, which are black, but she makes them green. And then she has a conversation with this troll, whose troll tag is Cuttlefish Kohler. Her name is Pfeffery, and we will get to know her later. Pfeffery seems very excited because she is so ready to play the game. And apparently Kanaya is also excited, but she's a much more reserved person, so she doesn't show it as much. And then apparently Kanaya has a Moirail, which we don't know what that is yet. But it seems that that's not the relationship she wants to have with her Moirail. She wants to have something more, perhaps. We'll learn more about that later. Apparently, Pfeffery's Moirail is a pain in the ass as well. So they kind of talk about that for a moment. Kaya then goes over to her window and looks out at her Lucis, the Virgin Mother Grub, as she remembers that today is the day that her Lucis will die, and apparently it's too late. She's already dead, making Kanaya's Lucis the first to die chronologically, I believe, because Act 5 does a lot of, or at least Act 5, Act 1 does a lot of hopping around back and forth in time. She then cuts open the Mother Grub and pulls out the Matriorb into her Chastity Modus. And apparently you can only pull something out of the Chastity Modus when it needs to come out, whatever that really means. Not a moment too soon, either. Kanaya then looks down at the green blood on her hands from the grub and takes a taste, but it doesn't seem to be very good. Kanaya then begins to talk with her Moirail, who we learn is Riska, and they have a conversation that we've already seen. And then Kanaya has a conversation with someone else that we haven't met. Someone with the troll tag Caligulus Aquarium, aka Aridin. Apparently Vriska has blocked Aridin. I wonder why she would ever do that. Apparently we learned that the Doomsday device that Vriska made was actually something that she was supposed to give to Aridin. And he wants to get a hold of it. Apparently he wants to kill all land dwellers, but Kanaya doesn't think he'll ever actually go through with it. And then Aridin goes on and on and on about wanting to get in contact with Vriska and blah 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 and me. And Kanaya doesn't really care. And then Kanaya tells him that the world will be ending tonight, and he just kind of accepts it. Only because it's Kanaya, though, and she doesn't really lie about stuff. Aridin asks if Kanaya's clouds told her, which, if you think back, Jade also looked into the clouds on Skya. So, there's a parallel. But Kanaya says that she did not learn it from the clouds. She has another source. And then Kanaya tells Aridin, who is excited to be on the same team as Vriska, that they will not actually be on the same team because Vriska will end up being on the red team. Kanaya then starts fucking with Aridin, saying that Pfeffery apparently has flushed feelings, quote unquote, for Aridin, and he freaks out and calls Kanaya out for BSing him, and then Kanaya admits that she's just fucking with him, and that Pfeffery is just a concerned Moirael. And then Aridin talks about being in the Moirael zone and says the phrase that anyone who's read Homestuck will know. Being a kid and growing up, it's hard and nobody understands. Fuck off, Aridin. We go back to Kanaya's room, and she consults her source, which we learn is actually Rose's walkthrough of the game that was transmitted via the horror terrors into Paradox Space. Bam. And also, fucking Kanaya has this like idea of what Rose looks like in her head, which is basically just Rose with like troll horns and gray skin, which is kind of funny. And she also kind of has like a sort of crush on Rose, apparently, like in a sort of like way you would crush on like a celebrity figure or something. We then go over to Tavros in his land. And Vriska, as a server player, has built a bunch of stairs leading up to his first gate, except he's a cripple, so he can't climb stairs. Vriska says that it's not meant to antagonize him, it's meant to make him stronger. And she demands that he apologize for being crippled, because she's Vriska. Tavros summons his inner confidence, Rufio, but Rufio is not real, so nothing happens, and he is just sad. Kanaya, Vriska server player, mediates by picking up Vriska's toilet and bopping her in the back of the head with it, and demands that Vriska build Tavros some ramps, and annoys Vriska enough that she decides that she will help after Kanaya threatens to drop the toilet on Vriska's head if she doesn't. Vriska then scurries downstairs and finds some rocket boots that she has, and she sends the captcha code over to Tavros, and he makes a flying rocket ship thing, and he starts flying around, and he goes into his first gate, and basically he just goes around his planet going through the ruins, solving puzzles and shit, using his animal mind control powers to control the imps and stuff, because they are prototyped with loose eye, which makes them susceptible to Tavros's powers. Vriska and Tavros are talking about the puzzles, and Vriska is annoyed because she thinks the puzzles are stupid and boring and that they should just find a way to cheat and skip it all. And Tavros doesn't want to skip. And Vriska says that she's gonna make her own quest for Tavros that'll actually make him stronger. But Tavros just wants to play the actual game. But yeah, so she drew Tavros a map to the next gate. And apparently she drew him a map to his fucking goddamn denizen, that's it, that's what it's called. Much like Terezi did to John. But it turns out when he flies into the gate that it doesn't actually take him to his denizen. It actually takes him to Vriska's world. And we see Vriska there dressed up like a fairy. Take that off, you don't deserve that. And she wakes up as Tavros falls onto the floor and goes over to Tavros, and kicks him in the head. Not like kick, but she kind of just like pokes him with her foot, and throws special stardust in his face. And he is very confused and disoriented. And then she picks him up and then kisses him. And Tavros is very confused. It doesn't reciprocate, so she throws him down and then uses her mind control powers to make him want to kiss her, but then he just drops it, or she just drops it. Kanaya, over doing her thing, sees Vriska kiss Tavros on the screen, and Kanaya, having a thing for Vriska, is very upset. And we find out that the fairy outfit that Vriska's wearing was actually made by Kanaya, and she was apparently making a different one that Kanaya throws out the window. And now it's time to learn about troll romance. But the problem is that when the subject of troll romance is broached, our sparing human intellects instantly assume the most ingratiating posture of surrender imaginable, but we will do our best to understand regardless. So basically, there are 4 quadrants to troll romance. The only one that humans have that is at all relatable is the flushed quadrant, which is signified by a heart. And basically how that works is it's what's called pity. It is, but it's mainly rooted in like strongly positive emotions. So it's basically love. And then you have the collisionist quadrant, which is rooted in negative feelings. So it's like hate, love, sort of, basically, but also not. So basically you have love and hate, which are the heart and the spade, and they're both considered forms of romance. You also have the pale quadrant, or moirails as we have heard it called, whereas the flush quadrant is called mate sprits, and the collisionist quadrant is called kismesis. The pale quadrant is essentially, a lot of people like to liken it to being best friends, but at least how we see it, it's a lot more like you have a person who is very dangerous on their own, and you have another much calmer, more level-headed person who comes in and sort of levels them out. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's basically like a dependent relationship where one person has their shit together and the other doesn't at all. And then you have the ashen quadrant, which involves 3 people, and it's usually when you have a 2 kismeses who hate each other so much that they very well might kill each other at any moment. You have a third person come in and mediate and sort of keep it from getting too crazy. And we will examine each one in more detail. So we get an example of the flush quadrant with mom and dad. When 2 individuals find themselves in the flush quadrant together, they are said to be mate sprits. Mate spritship is the closest parallel to the human concept of romance trolls have. It plays a role in the troll's reproductive cycle just as it does for humans. Not much more to say. The collisionist quadrant, our example being Jack Noir and the Black Queen. When a pair of adversaries delve into this quadrant, they become each other's kismeses. As one of the concupiscent quadrants, it plays a role in procreation as well. There is no real human translation for this. The closest thing would be an especially potent arch rivalry that also involves fucking. Yeah. And also mentions how humans would never notice that Jack and the Queen have a Kismesis thing going on, but trolls would recognize it immediately. And we learn that there are drones on Alternia that show up occasionally with pails, large pails, and you have to fill them up or you will die. And you have to fill up one for both quadrants. So that means you have to have a mate sprit and a Kismesis. So, yeah, forced breeding. Troll lore is fun. So yeah, you have to fuck or you get killed. Moving on to the Ashen Quadrant. Our example here is Vriska, Tavros, and Kanaya as the mediator, because Kanaya likes to meddle and mediate. This quadrant involves a particular type of a three-way relationship of a black romantic nature. Falling on the conciliatory side, it has no bearing on the reproductive cycle except for indirect ramifications. When two trolls are locked in a feud or some otherwise contentious relationship, one can intervene and become their auspicious. The auspicious mediates between the two, playing the role of a peacekeeper, preventing the feud from boiling over into a fully colliginous rivalry. So basically the mediator keeps it from getting fully romantic, essentially. It's very common among trolls. And there would be, without this quadrant, there would be way too many colliginous relationships. And yeah, it also helps people not like, I guess, basically having like 5 or 6 Kismeses at once, which could be very bad, because if you have like 6 arch rivals all at the same time, that could get out of hand. Then you also have relationships that are very malleable and bounce back and forth, and we see that between Iradiabot and Equius, bouncing between the flushed and the colliginous quadrant. This sort of relationship volatility is why the conciliatory relationships are important. Without the auspicious, you have things like, you have people bouncing back and forth between flushed and colliginous all the time. And then our example of the pale quadrant is Nepeta and Equius. It's called Moirail Legions. A reasonable translation would be the concept of a soulmate, but in a more platonic sense. Trolls are a very angry and violent race, some more hot-headed than others, to the extent that if left on their own, they could present a serious threat to society, or even to themselves. Such trolls will have an instinctive, pale attraction to a more even-tempered troll, who may become their Moirail. The Moirail is obliged to pacify the other to function as the better half. So like I said, it's kind of like a dependent relationship. It's kind of ambiguous sometimes as to whether it's actual Moirail allegiance or just like a bro helping a bro out. And at times, romantic intentions of the flushed kind can be mistaken for paler leanings. So sometimes if you have flushed feelings for someone, they might mistake it for you wanting to be Moirails, which can lead to a lot of frustration. But some are very obvious, like Nepeta and Equius. And now, after we get some foreshadowing to Karkat later trying to explain all of this to John, and learning that there are a lot of troll romance movies and rom-coms and such, because troll romance is so confusing. And now we get a look at these two, specifically this boy, Aridin, Ampora, the moment we've all been dreading. Eridan's out on his flying seahorse when suddenly a giant whale comes flying through the sky, and Eridan, with his laser rifle thing, shoots it down, falls into the water. And then we see Pfeffery Paces, I don't know how to pronounce it, flies up and nets the whale and flies it over to this gigantic fucking eldritch horror living in the ocean on Alternia. Because goddamn. And then they head back to their homes, or their hives. Excuse me. And we get to meet Eridan, sadly. So, Eridan has the second highest blood in the caste system, and is a sea dweller, and only the top 2 live in the sea. So, there you go. He has a genocide complex, and he is insistent on killing all land dwellers. He likes extreme role-playing, and is pursuing a doomsday device capable of Armageddon. He holds a fascination with military history and legendary conquerors. He has dubiously modeled himself and his exploits after the most notorious figures and their stories, bristling with the glory of victory and the sting of defeat and political machinations and romantic intrigue. It's an image he is careful to craft through exaggerated emotional theatrics. And his penchant for mass murder notwithstanding, people tend to regard him as a bit of a tool, and they would be right. He also likes magic, even though he knows it's fake, but it's still fun. His troll tag is Caligulus Aquarium, and he speaks with a wary, weird, and sort of a wavy sound and accent. I can't do that right. If you want to hear it done well, look up Octopimp's stuff. He does a really good Eridan. And now we go over to meet Pfeffery. Pfeffery is also a sea dweller, and she is the highest on the blood caste. And we learn that deep sea monster was Glubgalib, also known as the Rift's Carbuncle, emissary to the horror terrors, or in more hushed tones, speaker of the vast glub. This makes her the heir for Alternian rulership, which ordinarily would place her in jeopardy. Her imperious condescension would steer the flagship from the fleet and make an attempt on Pfeffery's life herself, if not for the protection of this monstrous Lucis. And if not forewarned of their race's extinction by the whispers of that Lucis, she would have made big plans for the throne, all the plans, all of them. She would redefine what it means to be cold in troll society. Under her rule, it would mean caring for the unfit and infirm rather than exterminating them. And she has put this idea into practice by culling the fauna of the deep. She tends to wild and beautiful aquatic hoof beasts, grooming and feeding them daily. She captures and cages cuttlefish by the thousands for their own good, and also because they are funny and colorful and she loves them. They usually swim out of the bars of the cages, but that's fine. She runs her whole place like a sort of wildlife adoption facility, even if the wildlife's need for care is dubious at best. The practice is really more of an elaborate role-playing scenario than anything, but it's still fun. She also looks forward to using her reign to using her reign to unite the two races. She was told she would do this one day by her Lucis, even if it does contradict her message of extinction. But, oh well. Not all prophecies can come true. Her troll tag is Cuttlefish Kohler, and she has a hard time not getting really excited about particularly everything. Woohoo. And then Aridin and Fefri do something ridiculous. Yes. Fuck yes. Hell fucking yes. Then they have a conversation. And of course they are Moirails. And they go off on a... Aridin kind of goes off on a tangent about wanting to kill the land dwellers, and Fefri doesn't want him to kill them. And Fefri is convinced that Aridin always fails in his attempts because he knows it's wrong deep down, but he denies this. And says that the hemospectrum should be trusted. It proves that they are less than him. But then we learn that he actually spends a lot of time on land, despite hating land dwellers, and he spends a lot of time talking to the other trolls who are land dwellers, especially Vriska. And apparently he goes on about how he's sad because it's not really working out, because Aridin's got some colliginous feelings for Vriska, but she does not reciprocate. And Fefri tries to talk him through it. And she admits that she's never really had any black feelings for someone. Then she starts asking if he's got any red feelings for anyone, and he gets nervous and leaves. Aridin goes to get a beverage, and we see him pick up that Fago from earlier. But he'll drink that later. He opens up his fridge, or he opens up his thermal hole, also known as a fridge, and a bunch of unbelievably shitty wands fall out. We then see Fefri holding a can of Tab, and she opens it, but she can't really drink it because she's underwater. And we see that her Drive Specibus is a double-sided culling fork. And of course Aridin's is his laser rifle. And then Aridin tries to get into contact with Vriska, but of course she's busy having her Lucis die, and she doesn't respond. And he takes this as a sign that she is totally uninterested in him. And we learn that they used to do a lot of flarping together, and with their characters Marquise Mindfang and Orphaner Dualscar. And he felt like there was a lot of black feelings going on there, but apparently it was untrue. He also apparently helped Vriska kill people and feed them to her Lucis, and then he would feed their Lucis to Fefri's Lucis to keep her hungry, because if Fefri's Lucis ever stops being hungry, she will scream, and the psychic shockwave from the vast glove would exterminate every troll in the galaxy. Starting with the lowest blood caste and then eventually moving up. And Aridin admits that if he just lightened up on the feeding, the glub would start screaming and kill off a lot of the lower blood castes before it had any effect on Aridin and Fefri, and that would do a good job. But then that would just cause more problems for him, he believes, because it would make Fefri upset. And then we see Fefri in her world, and she is the Witch of Life. Solix is apparently her server player, and then Aridin starts going off about how much he hates Solix. But Fefri thinks he's a hero because he saved her life by getting her in just in time. And Aridin apologizes, saying he was just really worried and stressed out because he thought Fefri was dead. And he has something to tell her that he's been waiting to tell her for a while now. Apparently she does too. And Aridin tells her to go first. hoping that they're going to be saying the same thing. And Pfeffery tells Aridin that she doesn't want to be Moirails anymore. She doesn't want to be anything anymore. Because it's too hard for her to put up with Aridin's bullshit all the time. Aridin gets mad because he was going to tell Pfeffery that he wants to be more than Moirails. He wants to take things red. And not only is Pfeffery shocked, she's never even considered it before, because she's spent so much time just trying to keep Aridin in check. And Aridin starts going on a self-degradational rant, and Pfeffery gets upset and finally gets him to stop for a second and tells him that they're still friends afterwards, and it's really not a big deal. And then she leaves, and Aridin just sits at his computer desk, bonking himself in the head, as Pfeffery flies into her next gate. We then cut over to Karkat, who's looking at his computer, mortified, and we see that he is, in fact, Solix's server player. And he's trying to message Solix, asking if he's okay, but he's not responding. And then we see a dead Solix. Apparently, Galib did end up beginning her scream before they could get into the game. And at the last second, before Karkat could get Solix in, the scream was too much, and Solix died. We see Karkat crying. Jack sort of puts a hand on his shoulder to console him. Gamzee's in the background being a fucking idiot. And then we see Jack slapping Karkat around, trying to get him to calm down. Then we see Aridin is trying to get in contact with Karkat, but of course Karkat's too hysterical to notice. So then he messages Gamzee and asks where Karkat is, because he's not answering. Gamzee says that he can relay the message, but Karkat's kind of busy freaking out because Solix died. Aridin says he kind of feels like an asshole because he just was talking about how much he hates Solix, but I don't know if Aridin really does feel like an asshole. I don't believe you, Aridin, you little shit. Anyway, dealing with Gamzee gets Aridin a little upset, but he needs to vent at someone, so he starts venting at Gamzee, whose advice is to, quote-unquote, just kick back and motherfucking snap into some rude elixir. Basically, he's telling Aridin to pop back a Fago, because that's what Gamzee does. And we see Aridin take a sip, and it's okay. He's not that bothered by it. And Pfeffery shows up at Solix's place and grabs his dead body and kisses him, which causes his dream self to jump up. Karkat, Gamzee, and Jack are all disgusted by this. Well, Gamzee falls over. He may have just done that on his own. He may be totally unrelated, honestly. Then we see Spade Slick, who is, of course, Jack. This version of Jack Noir way in the future. He's watching on his screen, and he is just disgusted. And then we see Andrew Hussey watching on the fourth wall. And he's painted his skin gray, although some of it's coming off, and he's got fake troll horns on. He's also wearing a shirt with Kanaya's symbol on it. And apparently he's stuck in an attic. And then we zoom out even more to see MSPA Reader, in the land of stumps and dismay, pull out a gun, who vows to do an acrobatic fucking pirouette off a stump and blow their brains out if it doesn't keep happening. Anyway, we go back to Hussey as the reader demands that he get back to the story. Hussey gets mad and goes on about how He's been trapped in this attic for a long time. And we have no idea how fucking scary it is. We don't even have the slightest clue how many times that wolf head over there has scared the shit out of him. What a wolf head? That one. Hussy screams. He's hiding up here from the bullies. Being scared by wolves. Apparently there's also some huge spiders. And then one of his horns falls off the little headband. He starts flaunting his power over the narrative, how he can ruin everything with one fell swoop. You know what? I'm just going to read this whole paragraph because I like it. Do you have any idea how much power I wield over you? To what extent I can ruin the shit you step in with that squeaky clean Sunday loafer you use to stomp that bookmark and stamp that F5 key day goddamn and day fucking out? Do you possess even the most infinitesimal kernel of cognizance for the degree to which I can make the shorn, shivering weasel that is the totem spirit representing your wretched fascination with this website squeal in heart-rending remorse? It would be so easy. I could snap my gray, smudgy fingers right now and make you read all the troll romance exposition segments all over again, back to back to back to back to back. Oh, you don't think I'll do it? And then he does it. And we have to scroll through the entire troll romance exposition again. And he spikes his little cowl in a fit of victory and laughs maniacally. MSPA reader asks if we're going to get a recap, but he says, nah, we're good. Let's move this along. And Spade Slick moves things along. We then see Solix on Durst flying around. And we learn that he has a dream self on Durst and Prospect because, you know, this man's bifurcated in every sense of the word. We also learned that Aradia don't got one none unless you got one son. Aradia does not have a dream self. Solix meets DD while future DD starts inputting a bunch of stuff into the console, which makes Solix very angry. And he freaks out and blows up DD's pod, which is shaped like a spider. And then he flies off to his land. And then we see Tavros and Vriska adventuring around Vriska's place. All the Boondallers. And then we see the 8th Exile who's watching Vriska. Switch from Vriska to Rezi. The Seer of Mind in the land of thought and flow. And the 8th Exile begins talking to Terezi. Who pulls out some chalk so that she can communicate back by writing down stuff for the exile to read. And then the exile starts telling Terezi that it's time to exile Jack Noir. We then see Nepeta in the land of little cubes and tea, fighting big monsters with her Wolverine-esque claws. And Equius is also there, and she's so happy to see him that she pounces him. And they go sliding across the little sugar cubes. And we learn that Equius is the heir of Void, and Aradia is the maid of time. And we get to see the first of many memos by Karkat. Oh boy. Past Karkat starts a memo. And he's just basically talking about how he's going to start using memos to keep track of shit. To make things more... what is it? I don't know. I can't think of the word. More together and Yeah. Terezi, also from the past, but in the future, compared to past Karkat, just says, "Oh my God, Karkat, who cares?" And then past Karkat bans past Terezi. Yeah, he's just basically going on about how there's only one team and there never were two teams, and he hates time travel, and how apparently he actually read all of his memos, but then like when he started typing this memo out, it disappeared. And yeah, Trollian is weird and stupid. Why would you be able to make memos that people in the past and future can see? I don't know, but you can. And then past Solix, but like hours in the future for past Karkat, jumps in and starts laughing at Karkat about doing these memos. And then he goes, "All right, so if you're from the future, when do I ban you?" Solix is like a few lines down after I pretend to die. And apparently this Solix is right before he got into the game, which of course we know is right when he died. And then Solix starts talking about how there's something in his head and it's hurting, a terrible psychic noise. And of course we know that he died. And you know, we saw what happened there. Then past Karkat goes on for a while, and then eventually future Karkat joins and starts going off at past Karkat, but past Karkat bans him. And then current Equius, whose perspective we are viewing this from at the moment, jumps in, saying that he does not recognize Karkat as the leader. And then Karkat insists that if you read the future memos, it's clear that Karkat's the leader. And Equius says that that's not really true because all of the memos are really just Karkat babbling on about nonsensical shit and occasionally getting into arguments with himself. And then, yeah, that happens. Prepare yourself for more Karkat memos in the future. Anyway, we go back to Terezi, who's still talking to the 8th Exile. And then we see another Karkat memo. Yeah! And then he's basically talking about how they're about to start Operation Regisurp, which is, of course, to kill the Black Queen so that they don't have to fight the Black King and the Black Queen at the end. And then fucking future Aridin shows up from 3 hours and 11 minutes into the future when he was unable to get a hold of Karkat, and he starts trying to get Karkat to help him with relationship problems. And Karkat's like, "Look, man, like, I'm down to help you out, but this is not the place or the time. So I'm gonna ban you, but like, get back to me later, man. All right, cool." And then he bans him because Karkat basically just bans everyone in these. And then he's about to start going back on about Operation Regisurp when future Vriska from 609 hours in the future shows up and basically just starts giving Karkat shit about how silly and dumb these memos are, and also tells Karkat that they totally killed the queen with no real issue whatsoever. And yeah, Karkat basically just tells her to fuck off and bans her too. Tavros shows up from 38 minutes in the past. And he starts asking for romance advice. And then, even though Karkat tells him that this is not the point of the memos, and also to get to him in a private conversation, Tavros starts going off about it anyway, about how he's lying in Vriska's room and how Vriska tried to kiss him. Well, she actually did kiss him. And yeah. And that whole thing happened. And then Karkat's like, "You do realize this is public?" And Tavros is like, "Yeah, but current her is not reading this, and if future her is reading this, that's not as big of a deal," which I guess maybe makes sense for Tavros, but whatever. Vriska from 8 minutes ago, which is 30 minutes after this Tavros' time shows up, and then they start talking about it, and Vriska starts giving him shit because apparently after the whole kiss thing, Tavros ran off and just sat in the corner, and then apparently he started doing this. And then, yeah, they both kind of make up, I guess, and Karkat bans them both. And then Karkat's like, okay, anyway, time to get back on topic. And then future Karkat shows up, and he bans past Karkat, well, current Karkat, and then closes the memo. Woohoo. And then we see HB, who is using a terminal to talk to Tavros, is trying to convince him to get up and go kiss Vriska and stop being a little baby. Exile 8 starts talking to I don't know why I'm being coy about it. Fucking the Black Queen starts talking to Vriska. And of course the Black Queen is Snowman. Because who else would it be? Anyway, the Black Queen, or we'll just call it Snowman. Snowman's like, hey, so you've got to stop Jack by making sure you get the ring before he does, and then destroying it so that he can't use its powers. Get to see Kanaya's land, but we don't get to learn the full name. We just know it's called the Land of Rays and something else. And then she reads a Karkat memo, who apparently was the Karkat that got banned from the first memo. Future Karkat from 599 hours in the future from where Kanaya is sitting. Starts his own fucking memo. And and he just kind of starts going off about past Karkat and how much he hates him. And how the memos were a terrible idea. And he probably should have never done them in the first place. And also, apparently, they played through Spurb and they beat it, but something happened at the very end and it got fucked up, but Karkat can't figure out what went wrong. And then he's just so fucking distraught that he just starts, for once he's actually hoping someone will show up. And he starts asking everyone what they did for last Perige's Eve, which is basically Christmas Eve. Apparently his Lucis had been gone for days and he was starting to get worried, but then it finally returned carrying a fresh behemoth, and they decorated it. And just as Karkat's gonna leave, Kanaya shows up and they have like a nice little conversation about like what she did, which she basically just stayed in with her Lucis. And apparently Kanaya only joined in because she saw that she was going to join in because she read the memo beforehand. And they start kind of talking about how dumb that is. And then Karkat tells her about how they won the game, but then they didn't actually win in the end. They lost. And apparently he explained it in the memo right before this one, which we haven't read yet. And then Kanaya starts getting romance advice from Karkat. And at this point, Karkat's like, fuck it, alright, just tell me. And of course, we know that Kanaya has a red thing for Vriska, but not red enough. And Kanaya tries not to admit it, but she accidentally slips the pronoun she, and then Karkat figures it out from there. Kanaya apparently finds it strange that Karkat is so well versed in romance and shit. And they both agree to kind of drop the conversation there. But they don't really. They kind of go on about it, as often happens when you have like a real talk with a bro, with the dudes. Apparently, at one point, Karkat thought he was his own Kismis's because he's never had black feelings for anyone, even though he's always angry, which might surprise anyone who actually understood that explanation of troll romance, which is something to tuck away for later, just so you know. Just Karkat's Kismesis. Just put that in the back of your mind. We'll get to that. It's going to be a nice payoff. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. They kind of talk on for a minute, and suddenly, apparently, future Kanaya is doing some crazy shit, and Karkat's freaking out, and suddenly, Karkat just stops replying, and then future Karkat 2 from 600 hours in the future, which is 1 hour after the first future Karkat, jumps on, and he says he passed out, and says that Kanaya's out of her goddamn mind, but in a good way, and that he's shutting this down. He will see her in the future. And then Kanaya scrolls up the Trollian timeline, and we see this crazy fucking thing at the top. And then we see Terezi flying around her world. And we see her Lucis sprite, dragon sprite, who is sniffing around. And then she has a conversation with Karkat. Terezi starts talking to Karkat about how they need to go after the Queen's Ring, and they can't trust Jack to do it on his own, because if they do, he'll betray them in the end. Karkat's not really about this because he's kind of cool with Jack at the moment, and he doesn't want to exile Jack. Terezi thinks it's cute that Karkat kind of looks up to Jack in a way, but yeah, they just kind of go back and forth. Karkat's like, no, he's cool, and Terezi's like, no, he's a jerk, and we need to exile him. And Terezi brings up how Jack stabbed Karkat, and apparently it's happened multiple times. Karkat insists that at least some of those stabbings were accidental, and says that Terezi's beaten him up a few times herself, but she never drew blood, and she's still curious about what color his blood is, but he will not tell. And it seems that Terezi has actually figured out his blood color, because she uses the phrase as she licks her fucking glasses to quote unquote see better. She says, "That is better. It's much easier to read your color this way. Your drab, dirty pavement gray on top of bright candy red like a shiny lollipop." It takes Karkat a second to get the fucking message. She has to like kind of spell it out for him, and he's really confused how she knows, and she says, "I got a closer look, remember?" Apparently Karkat and Terezi had a quote unquote little moment, and Karkat starts freaking out and asks her not to talk about it here. And then, even though it's not a memo, apparently making all these memos is making Karkat fucking paranoid, and says, like, if they're going to talk about it, they need to talk about it in person. But Terezi asks how in person he means. Wink, 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 wink. Karkat asks how she smells so damn well anyway, and she explains that she learned from her Lucis, who she had a mental connection with before it hatched. Apparently, when she went blind, she woke up on Prospet's moon, and she spent time there learning to see with her other senses. And Karkat finds it odd that Terezi's dream self can't see, just because normal Terezi can't. But Terezi thinks it's because that deep down, Terezi prefers being blind. There's a certain comfort in it for her. Also, we learn that this Karkat hasn't woken up on Prospect yet. And I believe we will see the exact moment he wakes up later, so we'll worry about that then. And Karkat starts asking a bunch of questions about how Terezi went blind and blah blah blah, and Trezzy says they will meet, that she will explain everything the next time they're quote-unquote in person, wink. She may even tell him when he wakes up on Prospect. Until then, she will keep tabs on him in his tower while he sleeps like a little honey pajamaed pupa nestled in his cocoon. Carcat's like, wait, let me guess, do I look adorable? And Trezzy gives him a little shit before saying, of course you do, dumbass. And this is where we get our Car-Rezi ship moment. And when the conversation ends, Trezzy leaves with a heart. And they both sign off. But then Carcat signs back on to throw in his own heart. You know, like greater than 3. Yeah, anyway. And then we see Vriska's blood scattered around her room. Her arm torn off. She's now blind in one eye. It was blown out after the cue ball exploded. And we see her use her powers to reach out and mind control Tavros, and then forces Tavros to use his powers to reach out. His animal controlling powers to reach out and take control of Teresi's Lucis with a psychic double reach around. Then through Teresi's Lucis, connect to Teresi mentally and get her to wake up and walk outside during the day, which, if you remember, trolls are nocturnal. And then Teresi looks up, then gets Teresi to open her eyes and look up at the sun, which causes Teresi to go blind because Alternia's sun is so much closer and brighter that looking at it for even just a few moments can cause you to go completely blind. And that is how Teresi went blind. We then see Carcat running around his world later on, killing shit. You know how it is. Then we see him running around with Teresi, killing more shit. Gamzee's running around his world. Pfeffery, Solix too. The whole crew, they're all running around having their adventure. Aqueous and the Peta, Tavros, Kanaya, Aridin, blasting shit. Solix and Aridin fighting each other. Tavros in his rocket ship and Vriska with her rocket shoes. Aradia using her psychic powers move shit around. She shows up and starts beating the shit out of Vriska. Like literally just like at one point just grabs her and fucking decks her multiple times before using her psychic powers to throw Vriska around all over the place. And then finally drops Vriska's dead body on the ground and disappears. Then we see Dream Vriska wake up on Prospect and immediately get slapped by Dream Teresi, and the flash ends, and we move on. And we see that the title of the Flash, Make Her Pay, was a command input by DD. Diamond's Droog. He then commands for her to skip to the end, and she uses her psychic powers to bend Vriska's blood into the phrase, "Quit bossing me around. I'm not okay with it. I know what I'm doing." And then DD just says, "As you were then," and Aradia skips to the end. And she drops a memo And we see from Aradiabot's sort of hazy point of view at this point that there are a shit ton of Aradiabots on Skaya. The Black King is there in his final form, as are all 12 trolls. And they begin their fight. They end up defeating the Black King and winning the game through a bit of luck and skill. Clever moves like using the psychic powers of some of the trolls to take the meteors that are falling down towards Skaya and throwing them at the king. And Vriska doing the finishing blow with an impossibly lucky roll of her 8 eight-sided dice, destroying the king at the last moment. But ultimately, as the reward was within their reach, at the very last second, a rift opened in Paradox space, and something came from it that ruined everything. A scratch, apparently. And though the effects of a scratch are limited to the session invoking it, somehow, through some sort of consequence, something leaked into their session. A demon, indestructible, omnipotent, and enraged, would show up. The group would abscond, escaping with just enough time to survive and hiding out in a lab on one of the meteors. Only one of the Aradiabots surviving. Turns out this is also the same lab where Karkat, at some point in the quest, had made all of the Paradox clones and such. And we learn that by winning the game, they created a universe, but were unable to enter it. And we learn that the trolls, by winning their game, created the universe that the kids live in. And thus is the end of Act 5, Act 1. So, yeah, that was fun. Bunch of kooky, wacky shenanigans. Karesi's a ship, that's a thing now. But I mean, at this point, we've got fucking quadrants, so what ships aren't canon? Am I right? You can have one person fucking this other person and then hate fucking a third person, and then this person's mediating, and that's a Moirail over there. You can just fucking have all the fun you want with it. I expect shipping charts on my desk by Monday. Alright, so to sum up Act 5, Act 1, the trolls played the game, and they beat the game. And at the last moment, after creating the universe, before they could enter said universe that they had created, some sort of demon showed up and attacked them, and they were forced to escape, hiding out on a meteor in a lab. Yeah, so that's that, I suppose. And I guess I will see you guys next time. So have a good day, good night, or whatever it is for you. And I will see you in the next video. Mwah.